Hi everyone. So the proposition I'm responding to is that President Trump's Keystone Pipeline will increase the problematics of environmental degradation in the United States. There was 3 secondary claims: that there will be high probability that oil spills will happen again on the new project, the continuation of the Keystone XL pipeline will contaminate the lands of local communities and the native reservations, and the construction will damage the habitats of different species. So to start off with the first one, that there's a high probability that oil spills will happen again on the new project. It's not really fair to be comparing pipelines to this one specifically. So, different sizes, locations, built in different years. The only link is that they are in fact pipelines, which probably isn't strong enough to kind of assign them the same fate and say that, this one's going to spill as well. So one example was South Dakota. There was more than one spill there, so I did look it up. And in 2018, the statement released was that federal investigators said construction damage when the pipeline was built in 2008 is likely to blame. So really, there's over a decade there of improvements in technology and all these differences that can be applied now. Humans, they learn from their mistakes. Hopefully we can look at other pipelines and kind of look at what went wrong and then implement that into new procedures to avoid it. So moving on to the second one, the continuation of the Keystone XL pipeline will contaminate the lands of local communities and the native reservations. So it's kind of a hypothetical situation. There's no signs that this pipeline is of extra risk or something awful is going to happen. It's really just hypothetical. But Senator John Barrasso did go on NBC and say that this project would create 42,000 jobs and have around $3.4 billion of revenue to help boost the U.S. economy. So those are kind of more so solid numbers. They have research and backing and all these factors that kind of play a role in that. So that's a little more solid than a hypothetical situation there. And moving on to the third point, that the construction will damage the habitats of different species. Nobody is going to doubt that that is a possibility, but kind of in the scope of all the jobs and how it's helping the local and national economy, there's all these benefits, it seems like. Construction does disrupt wildlife. That seems like common knowledge. It just seems like a little bit of a minor point if you're looking at all the benefits. So to conclude, the Keystone Pipeline has many overlooked benefits, and the drawbacks are more so hypothetical.
Well, it's easy to follow the argument. It's pretty basic. You mostly are doing presses on individual points. On the first point, your evidence is really about the differences between the pipelines. The pipeline damage that occurred that does get cited is not for the same pipeline that we're talking about, and the notion, and you're kind of challenging whether or not that it's comparable. And you suggest that a difference of 10 years is likely to have improved the technology, and we'll have learned from those experiences. That's as hypothetical as the advocate's argument on the second point. So I think that, or the third point. So the notion that hypothetical arguments are going to be excluded here, that'd be a little inconsistent with the position that you're taking on this point. If there was evidence to show that, for instance, that the existing pipeline has better technology, that they're using techniques that are different from the past, I think that would be really helpful. Plus, obviously, there's no indication that there are particular reasons to suspect that we would have anything substantial. That something springs a leak, that does happen. The question is it a substantial enough problem for us to be worried about? And I'm not sure that the advocate provided good evidence on that point, and I think that that's maybe a better place to be making the press. On the second point, you basically suggest that it's all hypothetical about what's going to happen, that there's going to be some kind of contamination or injury to the lands or and particularly the reservation territories of the Native Americans. And you're right, it is speculative at this particular point. I don't remember if the advocate provided any evidence that talks about what that risk level is. Your argument in response is more of a disadvantage. If we didn't have this, there would be a loss of economic opportunity. That's more of a policy argument than a response to this particular point. It's not a bad policy issue, but the question of whether or not there is any contamination or whether or not there's going to be any risk isn't really addressed by that kind of issue. I think your better argument is that all they've got is a hypothetical. And by the way, maybe you've got comparisons that you can make to other pipelines where it would be more successful. Both the second and the third point, I think, could benefit from an argument about what the alternative is, because we don't really get a discussion of what the alternative is. If they're not shipping the oil through the pipeline, how is it going to get shipped? It's likely to be shipped on the ground, either in trucks or in trains, and I suspect that those are probably even more dangerous or potentially problematic. So it would seem like that would be an argument, a rich vein for some potential responses here that there's not really much developed on. Again, just a few presses that you're presenting here and there. All right, thank you.